Welcome to the Phase Transition Podcast. I am your host, Juliana Viegas. In this episode, I have my friend Dusty Rhoads back on the podcast. If you haven't heard the first part of his phase transition story, you can go back to episode number 5, where he tells more about his phase transition, which started when he was at BYU in his science classes and everything that followed after that. In this episode, we delve into his divorce, his painful divorce, and the spiritual abuse that went on, the challenges of rebuilding after a divorce, and carving a new path for his life while staying true to his own belief system today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you'll also share with those you think could benefit from it. All right. Well, welcome, Dusty. Thank you for coming to the second time in the Phase Transition Podcast.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
So what we're going to do is, kind of go back to some of the themes that we had addressed and maybe not dug into, so that we can learn a little better how you handle those situations. And also because a lot of people are going through these things, such as divorce and friction with family still in the church, coming out of kind of the faith crisis into a more stable spiritual or non-spiritual foundation, and all of that. I wanted to ask you, how are you coping, first of all, just so we can get it out of the way, with, the current situation with COVID-19? How is that affecting you? How are you living through this right now?
Yeah, thanks. I think, like a lot of us, just very frustrated and stir crazy, maybe. And I'm going to take one of my earphones out so I can kind of hear myself better.
Sure.
But it's a little lonely right now. But I am going over to a friend of mine's house 2 or 3 times a week to have either breakfast or dinner, or and we're also watching a television show together on Mondays. So
good. Well, no, it's important. It's important that you're not like all alone all the time. That would just drive anyone crazy.
Yeah. But I am limiting it to basically just them, and making sure that they're not going around and swapping germs with anyone.
Right.
Anyone strange.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then you see your son like every other weekend, or?
Ideally, but with this going on, I haven't. And also I had started a new job, and I guess at the end of, so I finished my master's in December, and so that happened since the last time we talked. And
congratulations.
And then thank you. Yeah. It was really good to finally is this real? Yes, it's real. It's really happening. And then I started working just locally at a restaurant, waiting tables at one of Chef Tim Love's restaurants. He's kind of a big deal in Texas, I guess, or at least in Fort Worth. And I was making pretty good money, just with waiting tables with tips, but pretty much all the restaurants, I think, in Tarrant County, all the dine-ins are shut down. So
yeah, everywhere.
Yeah, I guess that's everywhere across much of the world.
Yeah.
Right now, so so I don't feel alone in that sense either.
Right. I mean, in the pain and the misery, we're all kind of in it together.
Yeah.
But definitely, the hospitality and entertainment and travel industries have been hit probably the hardest because, I mean, everything's
Oh
shut
yeah.
down.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I can't imagine how that's gonna change things over the next few months for people's situations and just the way that, you know, all the movies and stuff that people wanted to make or whatever,
Yep.
it's gonna be completely different,
And I have a
if not
feeling
almost
that
non-existent.
the paranoia is going to last for some time, even after, things are under control and whatnot, right? Because you
Oh,
have
I
the,
agree.
the during, the before, during, and after. But if anything, I mean, I hope that things change for the better, as far as people being more compassionate, government making better decision, paying a little bit more attention to the earth and how we're hurting it and each other. Like I feel like it's kind of a big wake up call for all of us to kind of look at all these things, being forced to look at all these things, and what
Absolutely.
what matters most, at the end of the day, what matters most in this life. If we were all about to die, like what would we really want to do? And most of the time is be with our loved ones or care
Hmm.
for those around us that we haven't paid attention to. So, you know, hopefully
Yeah,
we can learn some of these things and
absolutely.
not forget too quickly when things get better.
Yeah, no kidding. It's definitely, it feels like a shot across the brow,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for humanity.
Yep.
And or is it shot across the bow? How's the saying go? But
I don't know.
but
You're asking a non-native English speaker.
um but yeah, it really is a reality check. In people, I guess, in my field of study, ecology, conservation, we've been, in that field. It's very frustrating. I guess we've probably had a communication failure, and failing to address the public, in everyday language, like what this means, what the way that we live, in industrialized nations, especially, and so I think a lot of us, at least the scientists and naturalists, who I associate with, there's been this feeling for a while that we've been living unsustainably,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so I think there's a lot of yeah, and so I think there's a lot of bittersweet emotions that, we don't want anybody to go through this, but we kind of, I think, in some ways, are surprised it's taken this long for a pandemic of this scale to pop up,
Yes, yes.
So, yeah.
And I forget the name, but the people who do study diseases specifically, how do
Hmm.
you call them?
Someone who studies diseases would be a pathologist, and then somebody who studies epidemics would be like an epidemiologist.
Yeah, so the epidemiologists have also predicted something like this to happen. Some of them are having the same opinion, that they're surprised it's just happening now because they were expecting it earlier. So,
Yeah,
um,
it is quite surprising. Yes,
that we've managed
that
to, not be
our
here.
luck has lasted this
Yes.
long. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I guess, yeah, we have to kind of go with the flow and see where this leads us, and hopefully, I mean, it's gonna hurt a lot before it gets better, unfortunately, but
It's so true, and we're already feeling it hard,
uh-huh, yep,
and it hasn't even ballooned here yet, the way
yep,
it has in like
yep,
Italy and stuff, and
yep,
it's gonna. I mean,
yep. Yeah,
at
because we
least,
have so many more people. I mean, they have such a small
yeah.
population comparatively.
Hmm.
And the way, because there is now access to more testing, and the way it's you know grows exponentially, which also means that there is a lot more than we don't know. And that's the scary
Yes,
part.
yes,
But hey, yeah, we have to kind of see where it goes and hope that, again, most people aren't going to die from it, but let's hope that,
Hmm.
most just run it and get better. So, all right, well, let's put that aside for a minute and
Sure.
talk about where we left things off. And so you wanted to expand a little bit on how difficult the divorce was, and if you can kind of give a short rundown summary of how it happened, and then for those again who haven't heard Dusty's story, you can go back to episode number 5 where he goes a bit more into details, um, or lays off the foundation of what happened. So,
Sure.
okay, take us there.
Yeah. So yeah, I was divorced in the beginning of 2012. I actually got my divorce papers um, in the mailbox the first day of my fourth semester as a graduate student
Mm,
um, in, in Mississippi. The first time I was in graduate school, and and my I was very much very true blue, true believing Mormon at the time. Um, but there were some problems in the marriage, and but I was starting to at least have doubts by this point, and I was starting to be very critical, almost like a very angry apologist,
mm,
I guess you could say. I felt like I was going through a phase of trying to save the church from itself, and I think a lot. I know you have as well, like with the your op-ed articles that you wrote that were very progressive,
right.
Um,
And with a
and
tinge of hope at the time, right? With a tinge of like,
yeah,
I hope they see this, I hope they change this. Yeah.
yeah, and you're just hoping that it's not so top down. You're hoping that it's just more cultural, um, and and so anyway, there was my book on these snakes that I studied came out in 2008, and I finished my undergraduate studies in biology at BYU in 2009, and there was still, and I went to a ward in Provo, had a lot of BYU students, both undergraduate and graduate, had families as well as a regular family ward. But there was still a very anti-evolution sort of tone or tenor
Mm,
that would come up in Sunday school whenever the topic did come up,
right.
and I was this was right when I started getting really excited about like studying evolution
Mm-hmm.
in 2009, and I remember one of my ecology teachers at BYU, I think her name was Laureen Allred. She played acoustic guitar in class. Very dynamic professor, speaker, presenter. And I had actually approached her, or at least sent an email to her after my book on snakes came out, saying, "Hey, she had written a book, I think, in the ecology um, sciences." And I was like, "Hey, and she was very passionate about sort of steering Mormons in a more ecologically savvy, more science savvy direction,
Mm-hmm.
and so I approached her about writing a book together,
Mm-hmm.
about like helping Mormons understand evolution. I never heard back from her. She probably thought this undergraduate was crazy.
Right.
Like really, an undergrad going to, propose a book, with me. Um,
Right.
and maybe that's what she did, but maybe that's what she thought. I don't know. But that's where my mind was. I was trying to, save the church from itself,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually I think that's one of the things that broke my shelf because you just can't sustain the weight of that, you know.
Right. I mean, it the changes may or may not happen, but if it does, we're talking decades. So
Yeah.
how long do you wanna
Right.
devote your time into trying to, yeah, stir the giant in a
Yeah.
different direction? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I actually had it in one of our in our ward in Provo. there was a missionary couple there giving the Sunday school lessons for gospel doctrine, and and the topic that week was creation, and one of the first things the the husband said, the husband missionary, um, he said was, now did we come crawling out of some primordial soup, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
expecting a resounding no answer. And I'm like, and of course I raised my hand. I'm like, actually, yeah, we did. I'm like, they teach this right down the street at BYU that we did. Like,
What did he answer to that?
I think his eyebrow kind of twitched a little bit.
Because he wasn't prepared for he wasn't prepared for the joke to go against him, huh?
Right, yeah, exactly. He wasn't, and so, and that kind of thing, like the kind of things that I was interested in, intellectually, I guess you could say, were just so. I felt like there was nobody that kind of reciprocated that at church, and so I started around that time, 2009 through 2012, which was when my divorce and everything. That time, I was feeling very um, not good about Sunday school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Not excited really. It just, the things that I found exciting to learn about that I felt had spiritual application,
Mm-hmm.
weren't being talked about, and it just felt like it was very repetitive, very,
Yes.
yeah, not exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah. So that's where my mind was at, and um, and I was starting to engage in a little criticism of the church, and I think that was a big part what led to the divorce.
Because
And
your ex-wife was all in and did not appreciate your criticism of various things in the
yes,
church. Mm-hmm.
yes, yes, and in fact, she even called me like a hippie at one point.
All right, well, that's not the worst thing you could be
And
called,
it's
but
not, it's not, and she's called. I'm sure we called each other worse, during the harder times, but
yeah, I mean, if that's the worst insult, I mean,
it wasn't. But I just was so kind of taken aback by it because,
right, like
um,
you weren't aligning clearly.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah,
So, okay, so from there, then, um, so that plus other, conflicts, which you alluded to in the
yeah.
past podcast, eventually led her to just, say I'm done and then leave. And
Hmm.
but were you from what I understand, you were still wanting to try to make it work, correct? Despite
Oh,
the
definitely,
despite the
definitely,
differences in beliefs,
definitely.
but the mixed faith marriage was not an option from her perspective.
I don't think it was. No, no. According to the letter that she wrote, according to like just all of our verbal back and forth and the timing and everything, there were she had asked me point blank, whether I believed anymore, and I just said, I don't think I do,
Mm.
and she went and knelt and prayed and came back, and like she got an answer like that day, kind of right then.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's what's made me believe that was the main, and there were probably other things, and that's just my perspective. There's always two sides,
Right.
and the answer is usually somewhere in the middle, as they say. It's cliche, but I think it is kind of true.
It is.
uh,
It is. I mean,
yeah,
no one's perfect, and we all have
right,
our. Yeah, when the
yeah,
perspective are too different, it's difficult to bring it together, especially when it's fundamental beliefs and you started with this, I mean, commitment really and promises to each
uh-huh,
other for eternity. And if one person still holds on to that dearly, it's very difficult see beyond um, to see beyond it and to see
hmm,
that things could possibly work out if you really love the person aside from the belief. But that's not
yeah,
usually the case for all couples. So
hmm,
in addition to many other things.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
you and just to answer your question about the um, y- whether what was it? You asked me if um,
So how did you evolve from that? How did you cope
oh
with,
yeah,
the after the divorce and the separation?
yeah, it was, I mean, it was total denial. It was like I couldn't believe that I was going through it. I really couldn't. Like it was, even though I was where I was at as far as my testimony, which was less than 50% at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I still had this practical belief that families can be together forever. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like it was still like part of my core is like family was just everything. You didn't like turn your back on family. You never gave up. You
Mm-hmm.
never um and so that was very difficult. Um I did have a practical belief that that was true.
Mm-hmm.
Not a literal belief, but a practical one.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very difficult. And then eventually when they did, just to, I guess, kind of move the story along, there was a lot of arguing back and forth of whether she would stay, whether that she would go after that point and for the next couple of months. But, I did get the divorce papers and I was just I felt so guilty. Like it was really, everything was 100%, 110% my fault
Mm-hmm.
because of, I still did have a lot of beliefs, um, about my fault in it and everything that I just went along with it thinking this is what I deserved, you
Right,
know,
right, right. It's
si-
it's hard.
signing
It's
the
hard
divorce
not
papers.
to. It's hard not to because you're the one breaking the original contract, right? So
Yeah,
it's difficult not to. Yeah, I'm not sure.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. No, you could, yeah, um, and so just to speed it up, it was, I guess, the first. So spring break for schools tend to get out like on a Thursday or Friday. And so this was the Friday morning of the first day of spring break, um, and that's when her father and sister-in-law, some of whom had like flown into town, others drove in, came to help her move, and that was such a gut wrenching, heart wrenching day for me. Um, and I don't think we talked about that last time.
No.
Yeah. And I think it's important to talk about. And I'm not sure why it is. I just feel that it is, and it's some. I think maybe it's just because it's something I think about a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
but
So what
um,
what made it so gut-wrenching difficult?
yeah, um, because I don't I just don't think families are I don't think we are evolutionarily equipped to be torn apart from our families, and I had a 2-year old at the time. I think that was the hardest part. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've all had relationships probably come and go throughout our life, but having your child like not have that every night, every day
Mm-hmm.
was so hard. And but just to kind of start out that day, so she had her parent, her dad, her sister-in-law, and then like there were a couple people from the ward, showed up, like the elders quorum president. It was just so embarrassing for me. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it felt so intrusive for this like very tender moment, very very delicate moment for people I barely know from this ward,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in Mississippi. I'd only been there for like a year and a half,
To be
and
involved in such a private situation.
exactly, yeah, it was, I mean, the elders quorum president walks in, he's like, he's got a knee brace on, ready to move a bunch of boxes, and like walks into my living room and he's like, he's got a big smile on his face. How you doing? And I'm just like, And I
Dude,
remember,
like that's
and I
yeah.
remember saying, I said, how the hell do you think I'm doing? You know?
Yeah.
And he just went to the next person, and shook
As
hands with
if
them,
this
kind of
this
thing.
was a like business as usual. We're
Yeah.
just doing a move. Yeah.
Yeah, just
I
like
can
happy,
I
like
can
we're gonna have green jello afterwards or
yes,
something,
yeah. I mean
And
it's not funny, but it's funny because it's so oh my word. Yes,
yeah,
no. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that hurt. And so I decided I was gonna take Colton, that's my son, to the park for like an hour while they put stuff in the moving truck.
Mm-hmm.
And he's only barely 2 years old. He's running across the fields, and I'm just like choking back tears the whole time
Of
watching him.
course, of course.
Yeah, not knowing like when I'm gonna see him next. And it still hadn't 100% hit me because they're not gone yet.
Hmm. Had you, at
And
that point, you had already decided on how you were going to divide the time to see him, or was that not clear?
in the divorce papers, it had said that I would have him every other holiday and every other weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But she assured me that we would work something out to where I'm happy with the time that I get him, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but here's the thing: we were in Mississippi. Her parents were from Kentucky, and mine were from basically down Galveston, Houston,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so neither one of us had family nearby, and she didn't have like a plan B. She had lost her job a couple months before this happened, and yeah, so she was in the DFW area, and so that was 8 hours from where I was in Mississippi. I was at Ole Miss at the University of Mississippi in Oxford, which is just about an hour south of Memphis,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was an 8 hour drive, to see my son. But in my mind, I was thinking, we'll make this work somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And immediately after they left, and I was thinking that I was going to see. I was on a PhD trajectory there,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, which was going to take me a few more years. Um, but throughout the divorce process, while they were still living with me, um, I had changed it to be like trajectory, master's program, so to where I could. That was between January and February of 2012, and so my plan was to just switch it to a master's program and finish by the end of that year, December.
Okay. Okay.
And so that way I could get back to Texas and see him. But I realized right after they left that first or second week in March, that if I wanted to like not miss out on my son's uh, third year of life,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to cut this grad school short and move to DFW,
Right. Right. Right.
and be closer to him. And that's what I did eventually. But the rest of that day, when they got their stuff in the moving truck and left, it was so hard. When I got back from the park with him, um, they were just about done, and and I go back to I'm just wandering around the house, and there's all these like dust bunnies all over the floor because she took half of the furniture,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and including the bed and stuff. It was just like, and they were about to leave, and I fall over on the floor back in the bedroom, and just an ungodly wail came out.
No. Yeah.
I'm like in the fetal position, crying, snot, just like on the floor, and my son hears that.
Oh.
He's and he wanders his little toddler body back to the bedroom, and he puts his hand on the small of my back, and he says, "Daddy, okay, okay,"
Oh.
you know. And it used to be I couldn't talk about that without completely, breaking down and
Of
crying about it,
course. Of
you know.
course.
But that was horrible. It was the most. You just couldn't.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
My brain could not wrap around being separated, like that.
Yeah, I can't
So
imagine.
yeah, it was pretty horrible. And then that was about midday, I guess, maybe around noon. The rest of the day, I'm just a mess, crying, crying, crying all day on the couch because that's where I have left to sleep, or sit or anything. Um, and then about and I knew that you know, not to sound like a victim, but I knew the mindset of some of my family members, and
That
it was
it
clear
was all your fault, and you had just
exactly
attracted this into yourself. And I mean,
right,
it's
right,
easy from that perspective. I mean, and knowing
yeah,
exactly how, you know, I used to think to not put they. I used to think when I was in that I would have probably thought the same way, that, you made that decision, you chose to not follow through with your commitment, and
yep,
now this is God punishing you, or this is your consequence of your actions, or whatever, I mean, yeah. So
yeah. I did.
doesn't take away the pain, and
It
everything
doesn't
else.
because we do need that. We do need that familial succor. We need that familial uh, release or relief.
Mm-hmm.
And so about I would say 10 o'clock, 10:30 or so that night, I had enough of just being alone and suffering alone, and like I said, I was still apprehensive to call my parents, but
Mm-hmm.
knowing how they felt, I did anyway because you're just wanting somebody to like hold you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to comfort
And
you. Yeah.
yeah, and so I called my dad, and I'm just bawling, like bawling, 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 and saying I lost my family, and he goes, I'll never forget this. I'll never forget the feeling either. He goes, you need to repent, son.
Mm. 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 Mm.
And it felt like someone had physically jammed a knife like
Yeah, I mean,
under
it's
my rib
just
and
making it
just
worse.
turned it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's how it felt. It was like I felt like I must have turned white at that moment.
Mm. 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 Mm.
It hurt so bad that he said that. Like all I wanted was somebody to
Not
just
not
show me
not
some
even
love.
not even like, I'm sorry you're hurting.
Yeah,
Even whether you think it's their fault or not, like
yeah,
it's pain. We're talking about pain right now, like about
yeah,
excruciating pain, and this is the best you can come up with. Yeah. But
yeah.
it's all, pre-packed answers that we're just,
It is. Yeah.
right.
It's and so I think that was some of the start of a lot of the trauma I've had to deal with. I think,
Mm-hmm.
and for so much time after that point, for years after that point, there was a lot of times in my life where I felt like I needed that kind of extending of love from family that I didn't get, and the feeling that I would have having grown up in Galveston, where you have these jetty, these fish piers made of boulders, that go
Mm-hmm.
out into the
Mm-hmm.
Galveston into the bay. It felt like I was like trapped in the waves, getting hammered, against those jetties.
Mm-hmm.
Like trying to come up for air, and bam, get hit with another wave, and just like I felt like I was dying, honestly,
Mm.
like emotionally. Um, or physically. And but that was a very traumatic start of events, I would say at that point, March
Yeah.
2012.
And looking at, looking at the whole situation, and knowing, pretty much very well how someone inside of still active in the church would look at it, every ounce of compassion or pity or whatever would go towards your wife and the child. Oh, the dad left them, like it was all that's how it would be
Yeah,
seen. And so
yeah,
you are in reality left alone in your misery, because from everybody else's perspective,
you created this, so why should we feel bad for you? That, and I'm,
Right.
looking at it from that perspective. So, but
Yeah.
you're still a human being, and who needs, as much, I guess, understanding and compassion. So, especially coming from your family, even if it were a mistake, they should still try to help at that moment. That's something I don't quite understand, but
Yeah. I know. And that was a source of a lot of fights, but between me and my father from that point on, um, was I don't understand how I always was like I could never treat my son like this. I can
mm,
never. It doesn't matter what he believes or doesn't
mm-hmm.
believe. I could never just
Distance yourself or be so detached that you're unable to.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from his perspective, he probably felt like he was doing the right thing, or that there's nothing wrong that he was doing, but it was very harsh. It was like blunt force trauma,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that is
uh,
unfortunately very common. I mean, I've talked to many people who, even just leaving the church, the parents are like, you know what, you're not my kid, my son or my daughter anymore. It would be
wow.
better if you hadn't been born. Like, just
Oh my gosh.
like really harsh things like that. I mean, it's because of the way, we are indoctrinated, that it's that or
Mm-hmm.
nothing.
Yeah, and
They
that's
say family first, but in reality, it's church first.
exactly. Yeah, the family first, I think, is just a good selling thing to
Mm-hmm.
kind of hook you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because who
Yeah,
doesn't believe that? Who doesn't believe
right,
that? But
exactly. It's universal. Yeah.
here you are, you don't believe the prophet or whatever, and it's like, I'm gone. Like, wasn't family supposed to be first? Like, why is the prophet first, or
Right.
why is the church first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's backwards. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people who have parents who've left the church, but who have parents still in the church feel that way, especially ones who go on missions.
Mm-hmm.
They probably feel like, okay, how is that putting family first? You
Yep.
know, um,
Yeah, it's
you
it's
know,
very a lot of contradicting messages, and underlining contradicting messages, because it's never overtly, family first and be with your family first, but yet you see all the leadership that's never home, always out and about doing who knows what for the church, and then the families behind, neglected. The mothers are, tending to the many kids all alone, and because the
yeah,
dad is trying to finish up all the visiting, home teaching, or who knows what. So yeah, it's just,
hmm
I
it's a
mean,
very interesting.
it appears that it's changed some because they've realized that over time.
hmm
um but it's still there,
Yeah, that's sad.
so
That's sad.
how did you finally pull yourself out? Because again, it's not something that you
Yeah,
forget or becomes easier, but you learn to live with it, you learn to go on because you choose to live. So
yeah.
how did you do that?
Gosh, I don't. Well, um, it took me years, and I, I don't know. I think it's like grieving, but it's a weird kind of grieving because the person that you're grieving for is still alive,
Of course.
and I still am in pain a lot, about missing out on so much. Um, it's a weird thing to not even know what you want to be close to your child, but for the longest time, I didn't even know what his bedroom looked like.
Mm,
Like
mm-hmm.
I mean, little things like that. I think that I probably never would have considered not having been
Mm-hmm.
divorced,
Right.
but it's just a lot of heartbreak, and a lot of times I don't feel like there's hope. I don't feel like there's a happy ending to all this. I guess the survivor in me, that's probably in all of us, and just hangs on and hopes that there will be a happy ending with all of that. But it's still very difficult.
Do
I
you?
haven't had a car for the past year,
Oh, that doesn't help, yeah,
Yeah,
for visiting and whatnot.
right. And so that's part of it. Um,
Yeah,
but
because I'm sure you try to make every occasion where you are together as good as possible, as positive as possible, and those are the
hmm
memories that, you know,
yeah.
Colton will keep.
hmm And the first few years, I cried myself to sleep a lot of nights.
Mm.
Um, and there was a lot of rinse and repeat of that feeling, that hurt, and being cut off from family members who should be trying to comfort you,
Hmm.
or at least I didn't even feel like I had anybody to talk to about it. And honestly, when you're going through those dark moments, you don't want to talk to
It's,
friends because friends, I mean, they're just not as close as family are. I mean,
right.
there's
Well,
always this.
it depends. It depends on the relationship you have.
Yeah,
But if you don't have these kind of friends that you can talk to about these kind of things, then it makes it difficult.
yeah,
Did you see some kind of, I mean, some therapists or not at all?
I did. I saw some therapist. Um, well, actually, that I think I did that last semester at University of Mississippi at Ole Miss, and then actually it took me about 3 years before I started seeing therapists, and I didn't really get to see them that much.
Did it help?
And
Did it help at all? Or
yes, it did. I still had a lot of anger when I got to the school that I'm at here, DFW area, um, in 2017, and so that was really when I started seeing a therapist in earnest. And it did. I had still had a lot of anger towards my dad, and
Mhm.
I think I've come a long way. Um, Not necessarily from that, but also from meditating and just talking a lot. Talking to my brother helps a lot.
Mhm.
Um,
So you did
he's
have
somebody
a
who's experienced.
you did have a
hmm
few family members who were willing to discuss the situation and try to understand your point of view.
I didn't. No. But one brother of mine recently is this past year uh, has been really helpful. Just kind of me. He's a very intelligent person, and being able to talk to him has helped me quite a bit. He never really believed in the church, so we're coming from very different perspectives.
Mm,
you know, it seems like so intelligent that he's kind of saw through it when he was a little kid,
okay.
and but he just pretended, to kind of keep
The peace and whatnot.
the peace. Yeah, everybody went to church. There was no not going to church in that family.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That wasn't
And
even allowed.
he's older than you or younger than you?
He's younger. Yeah, he's 8 years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you find out that he didn't believe?
Um, I always, hmm. Well, I would say probably maybe 15 years ago.
Okay.
So I was married, but I was living in Provo by that point, I think. And not to rat him out or anything, but he had a much more troubled youth than I did in some ways. Like he um,
He was a
would run.
rebel.
Yeah, he was. He would run away. He was, experimenting with drugs. He was in a band and stuff, and a lot of that scene was, just rock and roll and
Mm-hmm.
sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and so he fought with my parents a lot over that and stuff. At least my dad, and so I always kind of knew that he wasn't very serious about the church or the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess maybe it was 15 years ago when I first knew that he wasn't a believer,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, I wasn't very, quote unquote Christ-like towards him or towards my sister who my younger sister who had also like quote unquote fell away,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about that earlier. And there were times where I was that judgy person, towards maybe other members of my family, um, and of course, I still feel bad about that from time to time. But like for instance, one of my sisters, who she had a boyfriend at the time, and she was, spending the weekend at his house, but she was an adult,
How
and
old was she?
she had to have been in her early 20s, I guess,
Okay.
and I had just
Yeah,
got,
definitely an adult.
yeah, yeah, and or she may have been 19 at the youngest, but she was an adult, and and I'm not going to say who, but one of my other sisters was like, um, "Hey, let's get everybody. Let's
Like
get
I
everybody."
wouldn't know. If they listen to you, they will know. Like
Yeah,
I'm not sure
but
who you. Yeah, yes,
what?
no. Let's preserve their identity. But it's kind of funny that you say that because if they listen to it, they'll know who they are.
Right, probably. Yeah, because some of them will remember. But she was like, "Hey, let's get everybody in the car, and we're gonna drive over to her
To go
boyfriend's
get
house
her.
to go
Mm.
get her." Yeah, and like I don't even know if she was there, but nobody ever answered the door. But my sister was all the one who was like, "Let's go get her," like banging on the window and being real mean, like,
That was like an intervention
yeah,
to save the adult from
yeah. I remember
living
her
a normal
saying
life.
stuff like, "Natalie, get out of there! You're being nasty," or something like that. Like it's so ridiculous.
Oh wow, that is
But
weird.
I was part of that little troop.
Intervention
Yeah,
comedy. That is
it's
funny.
horrible.
Like going and pulling her out of bed. Like that's gonna help. You two stop doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. Stop
Oh
doing
my
that. Pull her out
word.
of bed.
That is weird. Anyways, so yeah, so
Yeah.
that was the environment. So
Hmm.
at what point so you were saying, just to get back to your story, that so it was still a struggle, like not being able to participate in all of, the day-to-day, um seeing your son growing up and just his evolution.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It was like I just couldn't adjust to just not having a family with me all the time.
mm-hmm,
I couldn't adjust to it. And I was happy on the weekends. So I did eventually end up moving to DFW, and since I put my graduate school on hold, I just tried to find whatever jobs I could find right away, and eventually started substitute teaching in a small like agricultural town community,
mm-hmm,
just a few minutes from where my son lived. And so I would pretty much get him almost every weekend, more than every other weekend. So that
mm-hmm,
was fair,
mm-hmm.
as far as the divorce decree and everything. And so I was pretty happy on those weekends. Except I didn't have very much money because I was just a substitute teacher,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and so I felt pretty distracted from that. I never had these kinds of problems before. My wife and we'd never had any like financial issues. Like everything was okay. We had money saved. We were about to buy a house. It was like all that kind of stuff. And we, going to BYU, we didn't have any school debt.
Right. Yeah.
Our credit scores are great, but yeah,
Divorces will also, give you a financial hit that
yeah.
unfortunately it goes with it.
So yeah, one of the things that she had done before we left Utah to go to grad school in Mississippi, um, I say I signed the papers too, but it was her brainchild. It was her business idea, was to invest in like some kind of real estate scheme, and apparently it was real big at the time in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
So bad that there was a billboard that went up, that said, "Don't trust, just anybody,
Mm-hmm.
when you're investing money." And it said, "Comma, even if they're in your ward." Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty rampant, I think, among the LDS community. I mean, there's
Yeah.
always like the how do you call that? All these businesses that I forget the name. Like where you like enroll people like under you, and then
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like a lot of MLMs, like a lot of
yes,
pyramid schemes.
that is huge
Oh, pyramid schemes are enormous in that
because
culture.
everyone
Yeah.
trusts their bishop or their whatnot or
Yes.
their
Yeah.
because we're in the same church, I should trust
Yeah.
you, and so people take really advantage of each other.
Yeah.
And
One of our bishops, our first bishop in Provo, in our family ward there, he got us to pay $500 in one of those. What was the
mm,
phone one? There was a phone one.
oh, I mean, there's just thousands of those, and the juices and the makeups
Yeah.
and the
Yep.
vitamins. I mean, you name it. It's all hyper
Mm-hmm. It's very,
reproduced over there.
yes, it's very like turned all the way up
Yeah.
to the tens in Utah. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And yeah, I'm sure Idaho and who knows where, like wherever there's
Yeah.
like
We had like $40,000 in the bank, and we took. And she was like, she graduated magna cum laude from University of Houston, one of the University of Houston campuses.
mm-hmm.
So smart girl. Like that was one of the things that impressed me about her when we met at the Institute of Religion right after my mission. Um, but we had like $40,000 saved, something like that, and right before we go to Mississippi, and she gets involved with some of these schemes, and or at least one of them, and she convinces me that we need to invest $25,000 in of it, and I'm like, fine, because I had a snake business going at the time, and it was actually doing pretty well, but I sold it off to go to grad school, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I just, in my mind, I was just thinking, this is her thing, She seems like she knows what she's doing, It's just money kind of thing. But
Yep.
anyway, we ended up losing it. And we found that out around the time that we go to Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so
So that
anyway,
added additional stressors and
yeah, you had brought up the financial thing, and so after that got wiped out, which we had to pay that off. We didn't have very much to split between us.
right, right,
and
right.
and and I don't know if this was premeditated or not, and I'm not saying it is, but it was one of the ideas that we pay it off right before, like, not even 2 weeks before I get the divorce letter.
Yeah, so
So
that it doesn't fall on one person or the other.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So
Um,
yeah, it wasn't easy, and then um, it wasn't easy getting to Texas. A friend of mine who lived in, I think I talked about maybe this on the last one a little bit, who lived in Oklahoma, a couple hours from where my son lives, which is a lot closer than 8. Said, hey, I know you're going through a tough time. Why don't you come live with us for a little bit? And so I did, and eventually found a place in outside of Dallas. Um, but it was, I mean, I just wasn't raised, I don't think, to cope with all this kind of stuff. It was just, I just did the formulaic, you go to seminary, you go on your mission, you go to, you
yeah,
get married in the temple, you go to BYU, or whatever.
yeah, everything is already pre-planned and it's an easy path to follow, and that explains why, so many people, even if they do struggle with some of the, beliefs or um yeah, if they do struggle and they're not quite sure, like it's they can see where they're going, right? And it's an
Yeah.
easy path, easy as far
Yes.
as there's not too many questions to ask as to, what's my
Yeah.
next step in life. And so I can understand why, some people would rather kind of, you know, go with the
Yeah.
flow rather than looking at what's wrong and what's not okay.
Mm-hmm. There's a
You
lot of,
know?
yeah, there's a lot of
because they don't want to live what you're living, or feeling completely lost or not knowing, what's next or what to do. So,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you seem to, no matter what, beyond everything, it's super important for you to be true to yourself. And that, I think some people are cut that way, where, they'll take
Hmm.
the hits and the hardship because they don't want to live a lie, or they
Yeah,
can't go along with, and that's an interesting um, observation or question to ask. Like, why do some people really can't take the gaslighting and just the easy way, because
that is a
you,
good question.
and would rather suffer in a way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and follow their own truth,
Yeah, I guess it's just picking your own poison, you know? I don't-
Well, yeah, because don't you think it's true though? Like, when you
Yeah,
when you describe your situation, I mean, had you decided, I'm just gonna fake it, I'm just gonna go along, and some people choose to do that, and I don't want to judge, because
right,
you know
right.
what, they would rather do that than lose their
Mm-hmm.
families.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you were like, no, I can't say that I believe, and I can't. And again,
I,
depending on who you're with, some people will accept it,
mm-hmm.
and some people won't. Some people
Mm-hmm.
want you to be the Peter priesthood, and if not, then we have no business being together. And that kind of seems like who your ex-wife was more kind of geared that way. Like,
Yeah,
she
maybe
wasn't
so.
gonna take she wasn't gonna take someone who wasn't
I think that's an
both
accurate statement. Yeah,
both fit in. And in that, and in that case, it would have never worked, right?
right. And it probably wouldn't have worked from my perspective either, you know, but I still had this never say die attitude about family, you know, like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, so yeah.
So, but yeah, being true to
Mhm.
yourself is very important. And so, how, um
Yeah.
if you could, beyond coronavirus epidemic and lockdown and whatnot, like, if you could see yourself in the future, ideally, like, what's the path that you want,
Hmm.
that's what I'm wondering, after all this.
It's
What is a priority to you now? Because once we were in the church, we always knew what our priorities were. I mean, aside from family, it was just, doing all your duties and whatnot. But, like, what is the priority now? Like, have you found, what is, do you feel secure in your foundation? Do you, kind of figure it out
mm,
as you go, or do you have a clear path, that you would like to pursue, regardless of if it's going to happen or not? But
hmm. That's a very good question. I think that one is deserving of more reflection. Um, I don't have a very clear path as far as having a very, very, very happy picture of my future. I don't, you know, I that sounds really sad to say, but
I don't know. Maybe you haven't given it, you know, too much thoughts yet.
yeah, um, I there are things I'm excited about. They're more career related, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel a lot of times, to borrow a phrase from the movie Fried Green Tomatoes, I
Mm-hmm.
I feel too old to be young and too young to be old, you know, and so a lot of times I still like there's a big part of me that just wants to have a family again, you know,
Well,
and
and it's not too late, I guess. I
it's
mean, you're
not. I
still
mean,
pretty young. You're still pretty
thank
young,
you.
so, and have I mean, you are. I mean, and
Yeah,
that again, I think it's because of the, Mormon raised
yeah,
viewpoint that, once you're past a certain age, it's like, I mean, if you think about it, if nothing bad happened as far as, health wise, you barely in the middle of your life, like,
yeah.
even not even halfway maybe. So that's a lot. That's many years ahead of you. You can still make plans and have whatever it is, you would like to
Yeah.
have. So that's kind of how I see it. But
It's just a little bit disorienting because I didn't know how things were going to go coming to graduate school again. This is a very, very, very undergraduate focused university that I just finished at, and there's not a lot of people older than 18 to 21, 22. There's not a lot of graduate students. There were only 8 in my cohort of in the biology department when we started 2017 in the fall. So not a lot, whereas there was hundreds of undergraduates in that department, But
right. Well, in a way, it might be a good thing because that makes, fewer of you, meaning that the opportunities are not for hundreds of people, but a handful.
yeah, there's that. There's no doubt about that. Um, and But it was hard feeling like a young person in that situation, And I had people saying, "Oh, you probably get all kinds of dates with girls there, and and then you get there and you're like, they're all really, really, really young, or most of them
Yes.
are, and you're just like, okay, that's not gonna happen, kind
Yeah.
of thing, and if it
Yeah.
does, it'd be really kind of a fluke almost.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah.
But,
Maybe you're gonna need some other venues or to date and meet people, and that's another thing. I think that's a bit complicated for people coming out of the church, is not knowing where to go to
where?
to date and whatnot, and the
Where? Because
apps
I
can
feel
be really
like,
crazy.
yeah, yeah,
I know that world, and
yeah,
it's a crazy one.
and yeah, no, and I feel like such an alien, I'm just like my experience is just not very common. It doesn't seem like, in this area, um,
Mm.
like where I'm at as a person, like what, that's kind of
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I'm not so sure about that. I think you need to connect with people who've
it's
gone through this
possible.
more. In fact, maybe you could initiate a single dad, ex-Mormon single dad group so that you can have some kind of support in people. Because I've heard your story, not exactly, but I've heard other
Hmm.
people who have gone through, similar
Yeah,
separation and hardship. And I think you really need to connect with and maybe after this podcast, I can even name a few people that I actually know. But
that's
because it's
great.
important to not feel alone in your trials, because we're all humans, and chances are you're going to have a few people who have lived through what you've lived.
A
And
similar story. Yeah.
yeah, and it helps to know that, you know, some people can truly empathize, because I can't empathize. I mean, I can sympathize, but I cannot empathize because I have not walked in your shoes,
Yeah.
right? And it's, I think it's a different level of comfort you can get, or brainstorming, or trying to get out of there with people who actually have gone through the same thing, and maybe some have even gone beyond where they've completely rebuilt or whatnot, and they can kind of point some
Uh-huh.
in some direction.
Question, like, do you I know this happens with me. Do you ever get like frustrated that when you're like explaining your life story to somebody that you have to mention Mormons so much? It does with me. I feel like, gosh, Dusty, shut up about the Mormons. That's like my inner voice. Like, you know?
I don't really talk about it. I mean, the way I talk about it is very public, as you've seen.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? If I have to say something, it's usually in the form of an article, or, I tell people to just go and Google me if you want to find out about my Mormon
yeah.
story or past or
Oh, that's
whatever,
smart.
like, or what I think, because I'm just so. But then as far as like day to day, like, I don't really talk about it so
Yeah.
much anymore, like with people around me or whatever. Like, it doesn't even come up, like, I don't know
I still feel like I have to
if you,
explain myself. Like,
Well,
like
bec-
my life
yeah.
situation kind of thing, and like,
Yes, because you're dad and you're divorced, single and whatnot. Yeah,
yeah,
and because also my situation as far as being divorced and whatnot. I mean, we live 5 minutes away. My kids are with me 50% of the time. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's very very different. But you're
hmm
right. Like your situation is very different, but not so different that that no one has lived it. Like I can promise you that I know people who've
yeah,
kind of are going through the same or similar
hmm
or close. And
like I tried, like like I said, I moved to that little small town right outside of where my son lives. Was substitute teaching, would get him on weekends, but I still felt so isolated. I felt,
mm.
because, you know, my ex, she had her new husband within 3 months of our
Oh wow.
divorce being finalized. Yeah. And
How
it
did
was,
they like how did that happen even?
she met somebody so she moved to her brother's house. And,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and her and Colton were sharing a room in his house, and he was like either in the state high council or in the bishopric or something like that, but he was a high priest, and and anyway, she was going to his ward and she met a guy there. Um, I assume that's how she met him, and they were engaged by June, July.
Was he
Uh,
also like a divorcee or something or
no, he had already raised three boys. Um,
so was a bit older?
yeah, he was older. He had. I was trying to do the math whenever I figured all this out,
Mm-hmm.
because like he had friended me on Facebook that year, and I saw on his Facebook that he had graduated from BYU in 1981, which
Whoa.
that was the year that she was born.
Oh my word. So
I
there
was
is a
born
pretty well,
I was
not to
born in
say. I mean, it's
80.
okay. It's
Yeah,
it's fine, but
yeah.
it's yeah. How old is your ex-wife?
So she was born in 81, so she's a year younger than me. She's 38 now, I think.
Okay, so that guy is like 20 years older or something.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, because he gone on a mission too. So you think about that. If you go on a mission and you graduate from BYU, you're probably
Mm-hmm.
at least 25, by that time that happens.
Mm.
So he's probably at least 25 years older than her. So yeah,
All
I
right.
I had calculated when they got married, I think he was probably about 55, and
All
then
right, no comment. I'm just gonna not comment on that.
yeah, and so he had already had three grown kids. The youngest was I think finishing high school at the time. And the oldest was maybe in his early to mid 20s. But his first wife died from complications of childbirth from the third
Mm,
child. Yeah.
mm,
And so he was raising kids by himself. He's a good man. He seems like a good man. Um,
mm-hmm,
I don't know him very well, even still, but
mm-hmm.
um, we have him and I have, had a couple of arguments in our past, but about different things. But it was
Yeah,
very jarring. It was a lot at once. To lose my faith. That process took a while.
yeah.
Um, I remember when I was the first couple years of already lost a lot of my faith and not going to church anymore or anything. Of whenever the first weekend of October, the first weekend of April would come around, I would want to go to priesthood session of general conference,
Mm-hmm. Because it's a
because that
habit,
was,
right?
yeah, it's almost like migrational, spawning event for Mormons. It's like
Right. It's
it's
a
so
ritual. It's a
it's a
ritual.
ritual. Yeah, exactly. It's a ritual, and it was just like that's what you do the first week of April, the first week of October. That's in it. So it took me a couple of years at least to break that desire to want to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
even though I was no longer a believer, strange.
Yeah,
It
but
just
that's
goes to
more
show how,
communal. That's more
yeah,
communal, and
yeah,
the community. Like you go from being around people all the time, and a lot of people, to no one. And I think for you, also coming from a big family, that
hmm
seems to be a greater challenge because I'm fine by myself. Like I'm, I mean, I have my kids half the time, but like I don't feel alone a lot.
yeah,
Um but also I didn't grow up with like a big family or anything like that, so it was always kind of quiet in my house,
hmm
so it doesn't bother me. But for people who are used to large families and a lot of movements and
yeah.
kind of noise around, and then the church is always a lot of people, and it can be a harsh, it can be difficult to adjust to not having all that. More difficult, at least.
I think it was for me. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And I tried. Um, for a couple years of doing the substitute teaching and I even and that didn't pay very much. So I got a job that paid I think $600 a day, 6 days a week, but it was out in New Jersey,
Hmm. Mm.
and it was doing like environmental monitoring for for endangered rattlesnakes out there, timber rattlesnakes,
Okay.
and so that they can build a pipeline, a gas pipeline from Tennessee to New Jersey, New York. Um,
Hmm.
and I was there to kind of walk along the right of way and make sure that no snakes got onto the work area where they were digging the pipe,
Okay.
and
Okay.
and uh, and I was making a lot of money, but it was a seasonal job. But
Right.
it was like I just felt like my options were just horrible. It was like
Hmm.
have no money but see your kid, or have lots of money but live all the way in New Jersey.
Right. 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 It's very
um,
extreme. It's very
still
extreme.
dealing with everything. I'm still dealing with all of that kind of trauma, and still fighting with my dad about over doctrine and stuff. And it's
Hmm.
funny, like you
Hmm.
said, I was definitely like I felt I felt like there was a lot of injustice. I felt like there was something I did always believe about the church, and that was that we really cared about the truth more than anything else.
Right. Right. Right.
And I felt like the truth mattered. I really did.
Hmm.
And so that was something I would fight with my dad about all the time. Like, how do you not see
Yeah.
this? Like,
Because conforming is more important than the truth,
yeah,
to
yeah.
be honest. With true believing Mormons, conforming and keeping things tight like into a dish is more important than
not
the
ro-
truth.
not rocking the dish boat. I know, yeah.
Yes.
The brother of Jared boat.
Yeah. Huh? That is what's important. So, yeah. And
Yeah,
you realize that as you leave, that, yeah,
yeah. And
it's a lot of saying, but
yeah.
at the end of the day, it's follow the prophet
And
and
I
don't
was
don't
angry
rock the
about
boat.
that. Yeah, and I was angry about that for up until this year, really. um,
Mm,
but I, I don't know. I think I've just started to realize that everybody, everybody, just wants a ball to run with in life. and
yeah.
and they just run with whatever they think is going to be best for them, and best for passing on their genes, really, if you want to get down to it at a level that
Hmm.
nobody really thinks about, I don't think, at least not on a conscious level. But,
Yeah.
we're very biophilic. Anything that's going to promote life and promote life, especially beyond our generation, um, in our progeny, we're very, 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 very attracted to that, and very, 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 apprehensive about anything that it could even lessen the percentage of that a tiny bit.
Hmm.
And so conforming, I think, is a very successful strategy.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
it works. I mean, the model works. Clearly, the model works.
yeah,
Despite, is it true? Is it not true?
hmm
Is it good, bad? The model works, and that's why
yeah,
it's remains, and that's why it's strong, and
hmm
But
it
then,
does.
yeah, for people who start really digging and are uncomfortable with things not being accurate,
Accurate.
and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think people of science and And again, there are a ton of very intelligent people
There are.
in the church that they just have learned to compartmentalize and
Mm-hmm. And that's why I say I think everybody just runs with whatever ball feels best in their life, and so I don't fault people for it. I did even for conforming and stuff, and for
yeah,
kind
I
of
used to do it too.
Yeah, you did.
And of course,
Yeah.
because when your eyes open and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so not true, and this is such bullshit, and you want everyone to understand and
Yeah.
see it like that. But
Yeah.
then you do realize that not everyone wants their boat being rocked and their family explode or whatever it is, and
Mm-hmm.
at the cost of wanting the truth or whatever. And so people start justifying, and
Mm-hmm.
my family's fine and it's helped me, and that is not false. The
It's
church was
not.
never bad for me, like as far
Yeah.
as nothing really hurt me personally. It's
Uh-huh.
me not wanting to accept things that are not acceptable in my eyes. So
Yeah.
that's a choice. That's a choice.
And you made it.
I am
And you're living
honestly,
with it.
yeah, like I could not go back to, not even that, but any other church. Like for some people,
Mm-hmm.
I talked to someone this morning and she's found her place in um Community of Christ, and good for her and good for anyone who finds where I've talked to other people who found other churches that fit their needs and fulfill the social and spiritual needs that they have, and
Mm-hmm.
great. I mean, you know what, if it
Yeah.
helps you move forward in this life, I mean, we're all on this journey, this life that is tough and hard, and we need equipment to help us get through,
Mm-hmm.
and find what works for you.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so but
I
be true
agree.
to yourself too, because if you're not, you're unhappy in the end. It's
Yeah.
you have to be true to yourself. So
I see, and that's what I think too. And I would be very frustrated with people a lot of times early on into my apostasy, because I would like what you were mentioning, people who left, say, the Mormon faith and joined another church.
mm-hmm.
I would just be puzzled, because I was like, how is this Mormon model of how the Mormon church got started? Like, how is that not extrapolatable to probably how every other religion got started?
Yeah, you
With
just don't like the green Kool-Aid, you want the yellow Kool-Aid.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's very judgmental. I apologize to all my believing friends
No, no,
all across the board.
but it is. I mean, I feel judgmental too. I feel like but we all have different, like you were saying, we all have different ways of being. We're all on a journey that's our individual own journey. It really is.
Correct.
And that's why I feel, that's one of the reasons why I feel it's so important to, like, do like these podcasts, because nobody else is ever going to walk in our shoes 100% of the time. We'll have people
Right.
making, glancing blows with it, with our path. And so that's why it's so useful, because people do, at least take a few steps on the same path, for a little while, and then keep going on their trajectories.
And as we're speaking, I mean, I literally have people popping in my head that have kind of had similar stories as yours,
Uh-huh.
and I definitely want to have you guys talk to each other, because
Yeah.
everyone feels alone in their misery when, at least don't be alone in your misery and know
Mm-hmm.
that you can be miserable with others, and also find solutions with others, because that's helpful. That
Yeah.
is always helpful, to not be alone in your hardship,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll make sure to give you these few people I have in mind that you guys need to brainstorm and, talk to each other.
I'm on board. Definitely.
So we have a little bit of time left.
Mm-hmm.
So just yeah, and we're gonna have the same thing, but let's go on with the educated topics of you tell me what the relationship with the three and tell us what they are, like those three themes that popped into your mind at some point, and why what that is important for you, what do you want us to learn from it, and then we'll go as far as we can go, and then maybe we'll have to take it to
Okay, I
another
was kind
episode.
of spitballing whenever I texted that to you. What were the three? Did you have them in front of you?
Yeah, hold on. I'm
Okay,
afraid that okay, yes, I don't want to
I might have it. Let me
I don't,
see.
it's right here. So you talked about the law of parsimony, anthropocentrism, and truth claims, and the relationship between those things. So again, the law of parsimony, anthropocentrism, and the truth claims.
Yeah.
So what made you think of that, and why
Yeah,
should we know about that?
I'm trying to remember. I honestly don't remember what made me think about that specifically, but I do think it is those three things together are something I think about together in regards to my faith journey because
Well,
um,
explain each one briefly
yeah, so
first
so
before we try to link them.
so anthropocentrism is just the idea that we humans, mankind, is like the pinnacle of creation, that we are the center of whatever the purpose of creation was by the creator,
Mm-hmm.
and you know the universe revolves around us, kind of thing, and
Okay.
and you see that throughout history, especially in religions. Um, and the other one was the law of parsimony, which is, if you've heard of Occam's razor, which is just a scientific principle that says all things being equal, the simplest explanation tends to be the best explanation. The best answer for any question you have about the way
Yes,
the way the
I am.
universe works. Yeah.
I am 100% sure that I've studied that, read that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
at some point in time. It's just very far away in my brain now.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just and so I think because we tend to be so chauvinistic as humans, and it still lingers. We like to think that we've made all this progress and changes in society, and we have over the last couple hundred years. We've gotten rid of um, women have a right to vote now. That's only happened in the last 100 years or so, and then
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, abject slavery is a thing of the past, like and that's all happened in fairly recent times as far as humanity's existence on the earth.
Mm-hmm. Although I would object to that yes, of course,
Mm-hmm.
slavery here, like it's been known in the US, is not there, but it's just transferred, in my opinion, in other ways, at least worldwide. I mean, when you look at,
Yeah.
the factories using humans, and um,
Mm-hmm.
even here in the US, I mean, the way, some, like the Mexicans working in the fields, or in the this is to me a form of slavery.
Yeah, I
Like,
agree. I agree. Yeah. Um,
it's just transferred, men using and abusing other humans, using and abusing other humans is still very much going around.
yes, very much, very much. And other
Just
species. There's kind of not just racism and classism and so forth, but there's speciesism as well, And I'm not full on board. I'm not a vegan by any stretch, but I my ethos is starting to go more that direction,
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I'm mostly vegetarian. I do eat fish
yeah,
occasionally, but mostly I'm vegetarian. Yeah.
yeah,
Not that we're better, but I
right.
think when people start thinking a little deeper, I think we're just all in denial, and because we like what we like.
Yeah, especially being in
And we
Texas.
don't like to know what we're destroying,
Mm-hmm.
because we like our comfort and our habits and all of that. But
Yeah,
with COVID-19, I think we're going to learn something.
I think so too. I've already started gardening.
Oh,
I don't know if
good.
I told you that. Yeah, I started gardening.
No.
Yeah. And it's just like and it's just such a good feeling, and it feels like by doing that, it already feels like the world is maybe becoming a little bit healthier in some ways, even though COVID-19 is running rampant,
Yeah. No, I understand, because it's true. Like, anytime I believe we connect with nature in whatever way it is, and gardening is definitely connecting with nature, and then being able to eat your own
Own
stuff
produce,
that, yes,
which
your own
tastes
produce.
better.
There's something about that. Yeah, there's something about that, even if, your soul might be like compromised or polluted. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yes, definitely to be encouraged. I mean, it does something to the soul, to the body, to, your connectivity with the universe. Like, I totally believe in that.
Yeah.
Although I don't have a garden myself.
Yeah, and well, I don't. It's not. It's actually at a friend's property, and
Oh.
so it's like a community garden kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And but I feel like this is going to teach us, maybe one of the positives that we could get out of this is that it's going to make us as a whole more sustainable,
Yes.
as a global society, or a
Yes.
global community. And
Yep.
I don't think it's very sustainable to have these ginormous, huge tracts of land across the breadbasket of
No.
America that are completely monocultures of
Yep.
corn and soy and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I really think people who square foot garden, like, usually have more produce than they know what to do with, and so they're giving it away.
Right.
And
Right.
and so I think we're going to be more self-reliant when it comes to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope we go back to these kind of roots, meaning,
Yes.
like, talking literally here to, earthy, they have that in, I don't know if you've watched those Netflix um series of the world's largest cities, and they
Oh.
have like Mexico and Moscow and Hong Kong and
Uh-huh.
I think it's New Delhi. But like in Russia, in Moscow, they have those Bachao. I can't remember what it's called, but like people living in the city, I guess
Mm-hmm.
it dates to the time of communism, but were given a piece of land, and they had a little uh kind of a little cabin out in the country,
Kind of
and
like a little
they can,
sharecropper, maybe.
well, it's like a little house in the country,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have a piece of land that they're supposed to, work on and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like,
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool, actually. I
Maybe
mean,
communism can be pretty cool in some ways.
yeah, except here people have it, they have their own house in their backyard. So, but the
Yeah.
idea of cultivating a plot of land that is generalized, I think that's actually a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that I want us to be communist, but there, again, if you go to the root of what it was meant to be, it's actually not a bad thing. But again, leaders and people wanting power and control have changed it into something that became horrible.
Right. And it seems like most of our big arguments in politics we're trying to take very um, uh, complex issues that that exist on a continuum of realities, and try to package them into a false dichotomy between two choices that are discrete, which they're not discrete. They're continuous.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's never black or white or this or that, because what you see happening now with, very surprisingly, Trump government, wanting to give everyone a little something to help them out, and I mean, that's basically what Europe has been doing all the time.
Yeah.
You know, but they don't wait for crisis to do it. They just do it because, you know, people laugh at, oh, you know, universal healthcare and this and that. But look at, in a situation like now,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be nice that everyone can pay to be, you know, like, who's going to stay home and risk making other people sick because they're like, you know what, I can't pay that bill, you know? That is, you're just making the problem even worse when you don't have access, or you don't give people access to the bare necessities of, you know, healthcare and whatnot. So
Right.
I think this is a lesson.
It is. I think it's a big fat lesson
that teaches, you know, those principles that when things were okay on the surface, you know, didn't seem like a priority, but now it really switches and changes everything.
It's really hitting home. Yeah.
Anyways, I'm not sure why I went that far into a
That's
big
all right.
tangent here.
All right. It's fun. I'm actually enjoying it. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. So, okay, so back to the 3 principles that you came up with, and then you wanted to link that to truth claims.
Yeah, just you know, we're so like that. We're so chauvinistic, you know, that we've always felt as humans that the you know, the universe was made for us. The Earth was made for us, and you know, at first they thought that the Earth, the sun goes around the Earth, you know, and the other stars and so forth, and that,
right,
you know, and then, well, no, that's not it. Well, okay, well, maybe, you know, whatever. I don't know. It was always kind of like these great demotions in our thinking, you know, about how special we are. And it's kind of like growing up, you know, when you're a baby, when you're an infant, you think the whole world is about you, you know, and when you get older, ideally, ideally you grow up and it's not all about you, you know, and you see that you're just one little piece, you know, that comes and goes, just like a butterfly being born and, you know, and flapping its wings and for a day and then perishes, you know. So
right, the circle of things, but again, yeah, it's intrinsic to human nature, because you see that in the child who really lives like that, right? Thinking everything revolved around them, and then they have to learn that it's not the case, and having siblings helps. and for us, us, we live around other people, so we, yeah. Anyways, I don't know where I was going with this.
It's okay.
But it seems like it is inside of it's intrinsic to human nature to kind of feel like, you know, you're the center of everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so you know, so that's sort of, I think, where we get really dead set on our truths, you know, that we have, our truth claims for whatever tribe or religion or whatever it is that we belong to, you know. And I thought it would be an interesting idea to like write a book, for instance, of, you know, all these truth claims that the gospel says, and then taking a, you know, one or multiple alternatives, saying, okay, well, could it have been that, or could it have been this and this and this, which are much more simple, or, you know, easier to believe explanations. You know what I mean? I
think some people may have done this already.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But again, you know, perspective can be different.
Yeah.
The way I see it is, a lot of the things that, you know, principles or theories, you know, all the theories or whatever, that either it's completely made up or taken or stolen, you know, whether it's from the Masons or from, you know, the late wars, or you name it. Like, almost everything that's new can be retraced or found somewhere else.
Yeah.
Everything that's not new is universal truth. So, you know, everything that's not new is, well, you can find it elsewhere, or it's something that you didn't come up with that. So
Yeah.
and most religions are like that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Partially made up and partially stolen from other people who've come up with
Yeah. So I think
those things before them.
I think a big part of the reason that I'd say Occam's, invoking Occam's razor, invoking the law of parsimony, there's a lot of earmarks that one could say that a big reason, ultimate reason that the Mormon Church, for instance, got started was to um, ultimately just help Joseph Smith have a lot of, wives, a lot of kids, pass on his genes more. I'm just thinking
I don't
from
even know if that's the case. I quite frankly, like, the more I learn about the history and things like that, like, I mean, to me, he's like all these. He's kind of like I don't know if I I shouldn't say names, but like this big marketer, very noisy marketer.
yeah.
Like he reminds me of the marketing people of today who are like, hey, I've got something really cool, and they go and they steal ideas right and left, and then they pretend they came up with it. And
And
then,
then they run for
it's like
president.
charisma, and then yeah, like it's to me that's what it's not
Maybe
even
so.
as deep as and then he's a womanizer, and he's probably somewhat handsome or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or like really good at charming, and
Yeah.
then they fall for him because he's super charismatic, and
Yeah.
then he pisses off everyone around
Yeah.
because they're like, stop hitting on our women.
Mm-hmm.
And then gets beat up, like it's just a classic human story.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I
I
just
don't
I just
know.
thinking going deeper, like into the evolutionary psychology of it. Like
Mm.
it just
Well, there is that too. There's that too that got carried on because the more kids we have, the bigger we become,
yeah.
the more the stronger we become, and we can be this great, mini nation or
Well, yeah.
whatever.
Well,
Definitely.
generally in human sexuality. Now, I'm not a human sexuality expert, but I have read the shit out of a lot of population genetics theory.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
taken a lot of genetics classes and evolution classes, and what I tend to think is that in the Mormon faith, at least, so let me back up. Generally, females and female humans tend to be the choosier sex, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because they have more to risk. Sperm are a dime a dozen. We make billions of them every day. Men do. Um,
Right.
but with females, with women, their eggs are numbered from the time that they're
Yep.
born, and then just biologically they have a whole lot more to invest in pregnancy and all that kind of stuff um,
Right.
in the birth, and so women tend to be choosier in choosing their partners than men do tend to be.
Yes,
They have
that's
more
definitely.
choices, it seems like,
Yes.
and so yeah. And so,
That is a fact.
but it seems like Mormonism has kind of turned that on its head a little bit, at least a little
Huh.
bit.
Yeah, with like,
Because
yeah.
like all you have to
Yeah.
do, it's like like I said, it's very formulaic. All you have to do if you're a guy, is remain faithful in the gospel and go on a mission. If you go on a mission,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much it's almost sung about that you're gonna, have a prettier wife, if you go on a mission or whatever,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. All these folklores. Yeah.
right. But it's always talked about, it doesn't matter if it's official or not. It's always talked about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's very ingrained in the culture, and I always noticed, and this is going to sound very judgmental, but I always noticed a lot of Mormon couples, especially young Mormon couples. The guy is just, it's like he always married up, like 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 yeah.
Are you trying to say that there is no cute guys in the world?
Well, they just
That the girls are cute and the
it just
guys
seemed like
aren't?
the girls were always more out of the league of the guy, as far as like the guy was just almost always, not always, but just a lot of times very homely, and they would have this like hot wife, and you're just like going, what is going on here? Like, this isn't adding up,
That is funny.
Like,
I think there is a lot of ladies, like young ladies, like, like true believing, that are just afraid also of not being married and being an old, maid at like 21.
right. Yeah.
Which is,
An old maid at
I'm
21.
joking.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, so I mean, having gone to BYU, I saw a lot of that. Like people just like, I thought I was old. I was like 23, 24, whatever, like when I was graduating, and I was like the old one, and I had served a mission. Oh my gosh, like I'm in my mid-20s. I'm so old, like that is completely twisted.
Oh, I
but
was ancient.
It's culturally ingrained, yes, for sure. I think it's changing now, but at least at the time I was there, for sure. Like, you're in your mid-20s, oh, like you're like,
yeah, what do they say? Like, you're a menace to society or something.
Oh my gosh. And the guys who were like close to 30, it was almost like a death sentence. Like, you're never gonna get married. I'm like, what the heck? And here I am saying heck. See, I've lived in Utah too long.
But yeah, so I feel like Mormonism kind of turned that on its head a little bit, and so, and you see this in other species, you see, like, because there's this dilemma where a female, when they've looked at this in mice, wants to pass on her genes, to her offspring, right? And she wants to make sure that they have these inhibitors that will actually inhibit certain males' genes that they breed with, because there's this sort of race, there's this, I say, arms race.
They want to maintain like a certain line or something.
Yeah, genetic control, basically. And it's not something that I don't think anybody consciously knows, but it's something that this driver of life, and so, yeah, I do. I feel like that would be like a principle of parsimony, rather than, God only gives priesthood to men only. Well, I don't think God ever said that. I think men are just enjoying, in the Mormon church, they're just enjoying their options too much, they're enjoying their control, this the patriarchal kind of control that they have. And
yeah, and speaking of which, I mean, for those who are interested, like, as you dig in more into history, you see that even the priesthood was given to women at the beginning, and then taken away and things like that. Yeah. So that, that's a John Dellen podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And also saw recently that it was some quote from some general authority, like in the 20s or 30s or whenever it was, when the church was struggling. Might have been before that even. But they were, a general authority was basically saying, I envision the day when members won't have to pay tithing anymore, and that kind of.
Someone said that.
Yeah.
Well, now is the day. Today is the day. Like, today is the day.
Is the day. Yeah, with what's come out in the news, as recent months. But
goodness gracious, yeah, it's about time. Like, with everything that has come out and all that, whatever billions hiding or whatever,
100 billion in one fund, right? I think
it's about time that they just cut up the bullshit. How about you give it instead of hugging like that? Yeah.
Well, I think things just, as long as you don't give up. I think it sounds so cliche, but it does. I think it just does get better. I did have so much anger, towards my dad, for instance, and other people who I've known a big part of my life, and some are family, some are friends that I felt like abandoned me. I still feel like I deal with a lot of trauma related to abandonment issues, but
thank you for doing this. I know it's coming out of it's coming out of a very deep and personal sphere, and I appreciate you for being willing to share, because a lot of people are actually going through these kind of trials, even though you may not know them. So I know it will help someone. If not many people, it will help someone.
I thank you for that too. It's such a positive thing, and that's why part of the reason why I get so excited about it is because it's like we're kind of like anything that we can leave behind, recorded, written down, left on video or audio, all of that is so useful for people who come after us, or maybe they live concurrently going through the same thing. It can have a very high staying power, and
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. That's why I do what I do, because it's done it for me. When I've shared, and I kind of want to let other people have that experience, because I do think it's healing, and I do think it can help others as well.
Yeah. Amen.
So thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll do it again.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Face Transition Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you're doing well during these strange times of confinement due to COVID-19. I wanted to read to you a poem that you may have read before, or maybe not. It is by Laura Kelly Fanucci. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we were called to be, we hoped to be. And may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. This is Juliana. This is the Face Transition Podcast. I will see you next time.